Hello everyone. For today, we are going to talk about social relationships in middle and late adolescence. How does it differ with personal relationships? Let's talk about that in this discussion. So let's begin. So last time we talked about the meaning of personal relationships, and when we say personal relationship, usually it is an intimate type of relationship that you have with someone. You have a personal relationship with parents, with close friends, even with lovers, and sometimes people would say that they have a personal relationship with God. And personal relationships, they have a unique meaning to the persons involved in that relationship. This time we are going to talk about another type of relationship, and this is what we call social relationship. And how does it differ with personal relationships? Social relationships tend to be less intimate, with lesser self disclosure, but may still be exclusive and may demand for certain levels of loyalty. It's less intimate, meaning you are less likely to be physically close, you are less likely to tell things about yourself, you are less likely to share personal things, you're less likely to share personal secrets. It has lesser self disclosure, so they don't have to know about your personal life, but still you are in a relationship with each other. And it may demand certain levels of loyalty. For example, even though you don't know your boss personally, you can have some loyalty to him or her. You can have some loyalty to his or her company. And you won't do anything bad or negative towards that person, even though if you don't know each other that well. So this would be an interesting discussion because you will realize that even though you're not that close to someone, you are still trying your best to maintain a good relationship. And according to Filipino psychology, we have this value called pakikisama, or in English, that is related to smooth interpersonal relationship. Meaning, in order for you to maintain a good relationship with someone, you must exercise the value of pakikisama. So now, since you're a part of a certain group or you're a part of a certain circle, may that be in your organization, in your school, in your classroom, eventually you will still be a part of a circle when you are at work. Because when you work someday, you will realize that it's just like having friends. Sometimes you are so close to a certain coworker, but there are also instances where you don't want to get so close to someone at work because you don't like him or her. Maybe there's a problem with his or her attitude. Okay, but anyway, since you are parts of different circles or groups in your life, you will encounter what we call social influence. And what is social influence? It may include behavior, actions, attitudes, and or ideas of persons as a result of the actions of the other person or persons. In easier language, it means that your behavior, your actions, your attitudes, and ideas may not be totally yours, but rather what you know may be influenced by the people around you. We are more likely to be influenced because we are collectivistic, because there's a tendency for us to be close to our parents, to our grandparents, and even to our relatives. And because we are collectivistic, we value the opinion of our parents as well as our relatives. That's why we are more likely to conform. It is not our main goal to be unique because that is the goal for the Americans. But rather for us, our goal is to do what will make our families happy. Going back to social influence, when I'm teaching in college, typically what I do in the first day is ask them, why did you choose that course or program? It is normal for me to hear answers such as, I chose this course because my parents told me to study this course. That's not so bad. However, what's concerning with that is, what if the student is not really interested with the course that he or she is taking? So that decision is not really a product of his or her own thinking, but rather that decision is a product of social influence. We cannot say that behavior is totally bad because it's normal in our culture to take note of what others have to say about us. But sometimes we do this to the extent that we no longer know how to decide on our own. That's why we need to know the limits of social influence. When is social influence healthy and when is it unhealthy? For example, when was the last time that you were influenced by another person to do something bad? Have you been influenced by your classmates not to go to your class? Have you been influenced by your classmate to be absent? Have your classmates convinced you to try something that you didn't want to try? For example, that can be smoking, that can be other behaviors that your parents will not be so happy about when they know about it. Remember, we are more likely to conform, but it doesn't mean that we will conform on everything, because you need to know when it is right to conform and when is it not proper to conform. That is one of the challenging things to teach among collectivistic individuals. In order for you to be aware of your behaviors that did not come from your own thinking or were influenced by other people who are close to you, it's important for us to talk about social influence. Now, this topic is coming from a field in psychology known as social psychology, one of my favorite subjects in college when I took a degree in psychology. And it talks about our beliefs, our relationships, persuasion, politics, helping behavior, etc. And one of the highlights of social psychology is social influence. And then in the topic, they talk about the different types of social influence that may influence our day-to-day behaviors. And sometimes these things will influence us without us knowing. Sometimes there are what we call subliminal messages. The first one is what we call conformity. So when we say conformity, this is a change in behavior or belief as a result of real or imagined group pressure. For example, let's talk about politics. Say, for example, you don't like person A. However, your entire family said to you that all of them are going to vote for person A. Are you going to reconsider your decision because of what you have known from your family? There's a tendency for us to change the way we think in order for us to fit with what other people are thinking. Sometimes conformity is not just about behavior, it's also about belief. For example, you are surrounded by people who think taking a certain drug will make you healthy. Then there's a tendency for you to believe what they're saying, even without validating what they are trying to tell you. So that's how conformity affects us, not just the way we think, but also the way we behave. Sometimes in the jeepney, when there's a person who gave alms to the poor, there's a tendency for others to give some coins as well. So that's conformity. Here are other types of social influence. We have what we call identification. When we say identification, when a person is influenced by someone he likes. Remember, you have your idols, you have your favorite singers, you have your favorite athletes, you have your favorite teachers. Sometimes you try to incorporate what your teachers, what your idols are saying. For example, your favorite athlete told you that you need to eat this kind of food in order for you to grow. Because you think that you have a connection with that athlete, then what are you going to do? You are going to try what he or she is endorsing. That's why in advertisements, they try to get influential people or people who have a lot of followers so that those who will watch the advertisement will be persuaded to consider what that person is advertising. Next, we have what we call internalization. This is more personal in comparison to identification because with internalization, a person is able to own a certain belief or act and he or she is willing to make it known publicly or privately. In internalization, you're doing it because you really want to do it. For example, in class, typically in the first day, we want to convince the student that what we are teaching is very important so that they will internalize the subject. It's hard if the student tells you that I'm doing this just to pass. Okay, that's not a good attitude to have. That's why we are convincing our students do this because you want to learn something. And why do you want to learn something? Because personal development is not for me. I already understand what personal development means. But I want you to learn about personal development so that you will understand yourself. You know that a person has internalized something if he or she is passionate about a certain subject. But if he or she failed to internalize that subject or topic, then that person may not be so interested in what you are trying to teach. Now, since we already mentioned conformity, I'd like to talk about two types of conformity so that you will be aware, especially in the next time that you will conform. The first is what we call normative influence. When we say normative influence, you change your behaviors or thinking to fulfill the expectations of other people. For example, there are five of you visiting a friend's house. However, your friend is not so good in cooking, but you want to make your friend happy. When you tasted the food that your friend has prepared for you, deep inside, it was a nightmare. However, because all five of you have decided that you are there to make your friend happy, you are going to pretend as if you are having a great time. You will say to your friend that, "Thank you for cooking this meal. I really appreciate it." That's normative influence. You are changing your behavior just to fulfill others' expectation or to gain acceptance. This is difficult. What if your friends told you to try something that you never wanted to try before? For example, skipping classes or being absent. Next, we also have what we call informational influence or conformity occurring when people accept evidence about reality provided by other people. For example, in the laboratory, you should wear face mask and lab coat. Why? Because experts have told you that wearing those gears are protective measures. You are not just doing it for the expectations or for acceptance, but rather you do it because it has proven to be scientifically true. So there are times that we do something not just to get acceptance, but rather we do it because it's the right thing to do. So be conscious about the next time that you conform. Am I doing it just to make someone else happy, or am I doing it because this is the right thing to do? Here are other types of influence. We also have conversion. When we say conversion, an individual wholeheartedly changes his original thinking and beliefs to align with those of the other members. For example, we may have someone who doesn't believe in the existence of mental health concerns. Then, as psychology professionals, we need to do our best to convince that person that mental illness is real and it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to seek treatment, counseling, and intervention. Once that person has accepted that belief, then we can say that we have converted the person. And sometimes it's fulfilling if you were able to convert someone who never agreed with you before. We also have what we call minority influence. When we say minority influence, there's a bigger group that was influenced by a smaller group. For example, there's a minority in the society that believes in the importance of mental health. So, as the minority, we need to be firm in our stand that the people, the government, and the country should give more attention to mental health. And if that happens, then the majority is listening to the minority. And I hope that someday that the majority will also give importance to mental health. We also have what we call reactance, or the willing rejection of social influence. For example, the parents told their child that he or she is grounded, or he or she will not be able to attend his best friend's birthday party. Then what would be the reaction? The child will show reactance, for example, by throwing tantrums, by locking himself in the room, by saying bad words, by complaining. So that is reactance when you are rejecting social influence. Next, we have what we call obedience. And when we say obedience, you follow what someone else tells you to do, but sometimes you do not necessarily agree to it. For example, you do something just to conform to the law or to the rule. But deep inside, you know that this rule or this law doesn't make any sense. Other than that, we have what we call persuasion. And when we say persuasion, this is used by one person or group to influence another person or group. For example, your friends ask you to pay for their lunch. Your friends ask you to help them with their assignment. So that is what we call persuasion. And we have different persuasion techniques. Typically, I teach that in social psychology. And in the second part of this lecture, let's talk about leadership because leadership is a good quality to have. Even though you are not a leader, you should always have leadership characteristics. And at some point in your life, you will definitely be a leader. So you need to have these characteristics. So leadership is defined by Park Peterson and Seligman as encouraging a group of which one is a member to get things done and at the same time maintaining good relationships with the group. So in leadership, you are not getting bossy who just tell people to do this and that, but rather you try your best to maintain good relations with those people. So you make them feel that they are valued, they know that you listen to them. So those are good leadership characteristics. Why are there people who become leaders? And why are there people who are not interested with leadership? Let's talk about the different theories. The first one is trait theory. Trait theory is saying is that leadership is based on certain characteristics. For example, you are extroverted, then it's normal for you to talk to a lot of people, then you may be interested in leading. We also have what we call behavioral theory, meaning, in simple language, someone has leadership behavior because it has been rewarded. What does that mean? For example, if before you have shown some good leadership characteristics, for example, you are the type of leader who asks your members what you're going to do, you're the type of person who encourages good discussion, then your teacher is going to tell you very good. Your teacher is going to tell you that you did a good job. So that is what we call rewarding. Hence, if you are being rewarded, if you are receiving a lot of very goods for being a leader, then you are more likely to be a leader again in the future. We also have what we call participative theory. In participative theory, you involve other people to make common decisions. For example, there are some leaders who would ask the members first before they decide on anything. So that is what we call participative theory. And they end up, sometimes they perform better compared to leaders who don't know how to ask for suggestions. Aside from that, we have also what we call situational theory, which states that no one style of leadership is effective in all situations. Meaning, if you are good in leading in a certain situation, then you may not be that good when the situation is different. For example, you may be a good leader in the classroom, but you may not be a good leader in other activities. For example, that can be sports, that can be arts, because someone else need to be a leader in that situation. Other than that, we also have what we call transactional theory, which employs reward and punishment, meaning in transactional theory, you lead by asking your subordinates to do something good, and in exchange, you reward them or you give them rewards for good behaviors. For example, there are leaders who would say that those who would show the most improvement will get something. They will have a token of appreciation. Or there are teachers who give exemption to students who are performing excellently in class. So that is transactional theory. And lastly, we have what we call transformational theory. These types of leaders have some sort of vision or belief, or they are trying to pursue a certain mission in their life. For example, their mission is for the world to know more about mental health. So, in order for them to transform the world, they rally allies or subordinates in order for them to make the vision come true. So, in pursuing what they want to achieve, they ask help from other people and they make sure that these people who are involved are also committed to his beliefs. So, they are very important, especially in developing countries. And lastly, I want you to look at the heroic leadership theory. And according to this theory, there are four components of leadership. Let us begin with self awareness. So, a leader is someone who is aware of his strengths, of his weaknesses, of his values, and his worldview. He would know the limitations of his capabilities. He would know when to ask for help. Next, we also have what we call ingenuity, meaning that you are a type of leader who should be flexible and someone who knows how to find ways in certain situations. Specifically, they are confident, they are innovative, they know how to adapt to a changing world. So if you are going through something new, then you should be the type of leader who would convince your subordinates that we need to adjust as well, because everyone needs to adjust. Another characteristic would be love. Of course, a leader should be someone who doesn't only love his or her followers, his or her subordinates, he should also love what he is trying to do. Because if there's no passion in what he is trying to achieve, then how are we supposed to be motivated in following that leader? And lastly, a good leader is also heroic, someone who knows how to energize himself and others, someone with ambition and passion for excellence. So they want everyone to be passionate in what they're trying to do, just like in transformational. So basically, those are the different leader characteristics, and that's what you have to learn about social relationships. If you want to learn more about leadership, I recorded another lecture for that in this channel, and it is under Industrial Organizational Psychology. Look for my discussion about leadership, and you will see a complete discussion about the concepts that I talk about in this presentation.